traveling man, made a lot of stops all over the world.
Good evening. Welcome to Around the World with Ray. I got a treat for you. Before I do introduce this kind gentleman, I want to say that I want to thank my wife for suggestion. Now this is the pastor. Get this. If you've ever been to St. Benedict's Church, it's right down here off of M59 and Lynn Street. We are meeting the pastor, Father Jim Mayworm. Is that right?
That is correct.
How are you, Father?
I am doing just great, thank you. People don't believe that name, by the way, but it's real.
Oh, I don't know. Mayworm sounds like a friend of mine's name back in school.
What, Junebug was his name?
Yeah, something like that. Tell me, Father, how long have you been a priest?
It will be 50 years this June.
What made you want to become a priest? Was your family involved, or is this something you wanted to do yourself?
Well, it's a combination. I mean, my family always, Mom and Dad were always very open to whatever I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But I thought about this early on, as early as maybe second or third grade in school, because I was always raised in a Catholic school. My father, though he was a mechanic with Ford Motor Company, he was a musician all of his life. So he played the organ in every church that we belonged to. Oh. And I would go with him early to Mass before school, and I suppose that put the bug in my bonnet. And of course, you know, the nuns were very good at planting the seed of a vocation, and so I was in and out of wanting to go. And when I was in the 11th grade, my homeroom nun, Sister Leonida, said, Jim, I think you have a vocation. I think you should go to the seminary, and you should go right now, meaning my senior year. So I went home and told my parents, and they said, well, you know, whatever sister says or whatever you think. Make a long story short, I did enter that 12th grade year, and here I am today.
Father, I noticed that, you know, I noticed the Catholic Church has changed over the years. I remember when I grew up.
Did you really notice that?
Yes, unfortunately I did. I went to St. Mike's Church in Pontiac, where Father O'Reilly was the pastor. Remember him?
Sure do.
He was quite a pastor there.
He built that church, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
That was his baby. Oh, yeah.
I went through 1st through 5th grade there.
You know, I went to St. Fred's School in Pontiac, which, of course, we were rivals with Mike's and Benedict's. But that was attached to St. Vincent's Church, which is no longer. It's now St. Damian's,
I know it's called St. Vincent de Paul. Then it went over to
St.
high
Damian's.
school. It's called St. Fred's.
That's correct.
And there's always been a real big rival between those two schools.
Oh, fun. Absolutely. You got it. It's funny because I was dating that year, and when I decided to go into the seminary, I remember going to the junior-senior dance, and my date was the captain of the girls' basketball team, no less. And I said to Sharon, and I were dancing. I can remember the song. It was in our gymnasium there at St. Fred's. The song was Moon River.
Oh.
Moon River.
That's by Andy Williams.
Yes, indeedy. And so I whispered in her ear as we're dancing. I said, Sharon, I think I'm going into the seminary in the fall.
Now you had what was your home parish before you came here? You had a home parish where they put you. Remember your first one that you were at?
Well, Our Lady of Refuge was the one of most memory.
Is that the one in Orchard Lake?
Yes, correct. I was in my junior years. There, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. Well, actually, right on through high school and first year of college. But then we ended up living out here on Sylvan Lake and belonging at that time to Our Lady of the Lakes in Waterford, because I taught high school there for a year after I graduated.
What year was that, if I may ask?
1961, 62. I was teaching 9th or 12th grade.
Did you?
I was 22 years old. And I knew next to nothing as far as I was concerned. I just graduated from college. But I taught biology, religion, 4 years of French, and 4 years of Glee Club. 85 kids in the Glee Club.
Oh man.
So out of my biology class, I got to tell you this story. I bought my first car that year, and it was a Volkswagen. And I took the kids down to a science convention at the Cobo Hall.
Oh.
And how many kids do you think you could fit in a Volkswagen?
Not very many.
You wouldn't do that today, but I had 9.
You had 9?
9 kids plus.
Was that
a
the
rat
when
cage.
they first come out? Was that in the bug or?
The bug, the beetle.
Yeah.
In the
9
beetle.
people.
Oh yeah, I'm glad I'm confessing this 55 years later. We tell you, never get away with anything like that today. But it was fun at the time.
Now, what was your first pastor? Was this? I understand you were here before, but you come back.
Well, here as a parishioner, I was never here functioning as a priest. No, but the year I was off, my father had been widowed. And I met the widow of one of my high school students. And so I introduced my dad and her on a blind date. And come to find out, Thelma belonged here to St. Benedict's.
Coincidence, huh?
Yes. Now, my dad said, you can set this date up and wherever we're going to go for dinner and all that. And they dated each other that night, sight unseen. And when Dad got home, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was waiting up. And I said, Dad, where have you been? Well, of course, he had quite a story. And that very evening, that was Saturday night, going into Sunday morning, he went back Sunday night and proposed to this woman whom he had never met. And they were married for 27 years.
Father, how much as the Catholic religion, I see we don't have any more Latin. You remember the Latin?
Yeah, oh, do I? 10 years I was trained in Latin. And when I was ordained in 1966, the whole Mass was not yet in Latin. The first half was. So I was saying half the Mass in English, the second half in Latin. But it was a year later, the whole thing was in English. And I've never said a Latin Mass since then.
Tell me this, Mike. Who changes? Does the original Pope change what's going on in church?
The Pope at that time.
Pope Pius?
Well, no, it was Paul VI at that time. Pope John the 23rd called the Vatican Council in '63, and he died before the council ended. It was Pope Paul that ended that council. Well, I mean, he was there in 1966. So really all the approval of the changes came through the bishops of all the world. Ultimate approval by Pope Paul.
I also remember this much. This is something hard to believe, but folks, when I grew up, we always had to set Friday away for no meat whatsoever. You could always have fish on that every Friday. You remember that, Father?
It's almost as though today we should say, for a penance, eat meat on Friday. Yeah, that was a man-made law, of course. But it was so strict for us Catholics that we believed if you ate a piece of a hot dog, you went to hell. I can't believe it today that we're even saying that. But that was a very serious man-made law. And that was changed with Vatican II. Yeah.
I remember a lot of things back when I grew up. We always talked about heaven. We always talked about hell. And we used to talk about purgatory. Remember?
Do I remember? Yes, of course I do. That, again, is a man-made concept, although there's some justification for it in Scripture. I mean, the word isn't in the Bible, but there's some justification for it. But it's the human mind trying to cope with knowing that we have all been redeemed by Jesus, but as we die, we don't die perfect.
No, we don't.
I don't know about you, but I sure won't be dying perfectly. And so what's to be done then? That person isn't going to hell, but they're not clean, shall we say, cleansed enough to reach heaven, although Jesus has redeemed us all, but somehow we haven't accepted that fully enough. So we came up with this middle plan.
There's been a lot of talk. I don't know how true it is, but they always say, I don't think they never brought up, but they always talk about priests being married.
Well,
Was that ever brought up?
I'm getting too old to care. It's not your.
No, you're never too
There
old
you
to
are,
care.
Ray. But no, that's. Is it ever brought up? Well, yes. I'm convinced that one day we'll get there, but I'm sure not going to see it. Once upon a time, when I was a young priest, I thought I would live to see that day, but the church moves slowly on big matters like that.
I saw in the back of the calendar, it says there's different colored vestments, like say red, purple, gold. What is the purpose of these different colored vestments?
They're to indicate the time of the church year, the time we're in during that year. Green is the one seen most often, and that's after Pentecost and before Advent. The color of life, green is life-giving, and so on. The purple is worn before Christmas and before Easter as a sign of preparation, as a sign of penance. And the whites and golds and silvers are for high feasts like Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, so on.
One other question, Father. Why is, I might say, Lent always changed every year? Now this year, Ash Wednesday's February 10th. Well, why do they change it? Why don't they have it the same time?
We follow the lunar calendar for Easter, the way the Jews do with their calendar, you know. So it's let me see, you would hit me with this right now, but it depends on the equinox and the date that is occurring, full moon, first Wednesday, I think, after the first full moon in springtime. Not in springtime, but in the wintertime, it's not, I can't give you that exactly, but the change of seasons that are about to occur toward the end of winter. And so our Lent and Easter are all focused around.
It changes every year, I see that
It
much.
does, yeah. I think it's every maybe 7 years or 7 to 10 years, I'm not sure, that we repeat the date. But it takes a long time.
You know, people, especially when the new century turned over, they always thought this is the year when they turn over 2000, this is the year Christ will come back for his second visit. Is there any truth to this?
No, I don't think so. I think God's far more clever than that. And Jesus himself said, man knows not the day nor the hour, not even the Son of Man,
right.
referring to himself, knows the day nor the hour. So if that's true, I mean, how brilliant are we to expect that, you know,
I mean,
the
people,
turn of the century or the turn of the millennium is going to do it.
well, as they say, Christ has died, Christ has risen, and Christ will come again. And he's going to knock the SH out of the devil.
Woo! I'm glad you said that. No, I didn't do that.
That's why I spelled it.
St. Benedict's has been here about 60 years. It had a school, a K through 8, for many years, but closed about 15 years ago because of the expense of running it. The parishioners became older and couldn't afford really to keep it going. Fortunately, now we have an academy, cornerstone school. We have about 650 families, and it's, again, a much older parish. So the people are generous and wonderful with their time and finances, but we have a great time together. We're a family parish.
When we first joined, I was really impressed in how the people shook hands with the other people.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a church do that. And my wife says she's never seen
Really?
other, you know, like I say, people before Mass, we want you to shake hand or say hi to a person.
Yeah, we do that before Mass just to get people warmed up to each other. I don't want them sitting there for 45 minutes not knowing each other and all of a sudden, oh, can I get your name? So they meet each other beforehand. And people will say that who visit us. It's a very, they feel the love and the warmth. A lot of parishes are good like that, but I feel we're special.
I feel this, like I say, my wife, like she said, I've never met people, especially priests like yourself, because you're a priest, you're far different than any other priest we've ever known.
I'm a rare bird. That is for sure.
So I'm kind of glad. I like your jokes in the church bulletin.
Thank you very much.
I mean, and sometimes I like your thing. When you come up to people and they say something and you tell them right there, and people respond.
Yeah,
And
they do.
that's something you don't see too often. And people,
They have to feel comfortable. If you're going to invite them to speak up, they have to feel at ease to do that.
I really enjoy your sermons a lot because I tell you one thing. Now wait a minute. One of the purpose of the little kids coming on now. Since we joined the church, we've been, like I say, at St. Perpetual and Lakes, but I've never seen a pastor have little kids up there. What is the purpose of this for?
First of all, in our parish, we are an older community.
Yeah.
I'm putting it gently. So when we have young people, especially little kids, I want to celebrate them. And the people want to celebrate life. They want to see that there is a future here. And so by bringing the children up, it shows them there is a future. They applaud those kids. They love to see them. And kids are fresh and wonderful, and they sit through the whole thing. Half of them can't see Mass because they're sitting in back of somebody else,
Yeah, that's
adults,
true,
you
that's
know.
true.
So if I can get them up there once or twice during the Mass, that gives them an interest in what we're doing too. Hopefully they'll come back.
I like what you did when we went to the midnight mass. How you had two people dressed up like Mary, Joseph,
Yes.
and the little baby. That
Yeah.
was very interesting.
Real baby. We used a baby doll for the kids' Mass.
Ah.
Nobody was willing to risk their child with the tiny Mary and tiny Joseph we had. But for the midnight Mass, yes, that was very
It
good.
was very, very
Effective.
very, very different. I know.
Yeah, and it was fun picking that baby up and holding him during the homily to tell the people, you know, this is where God wants us. He wants us to be this childlike, you know, before we get to the kingdom. Unless you become as little ones, you shall not enter the kingdom. So I said, everybody imagine.
You know, I remember one part. I don't mean to go back, but when Christ was born, there were people like when Herod was the person that was in charge, and he wanted to pay homilies, but the people that was the visitors, wise men, said, "You are going another way."
Well, the angel actually seems to have announced that to the wise men somehow after they had left the king. But I imagine they were wise enough to see that Herod was not such a nice fellow and that he had evil intentions of mind. He didn't want to go and worship Jesus.
He probably wanted to kill the baby, knowing him, because they always killed the firstborn of every when they had that.
When they would do a thing like he was doing. Although they say history does not show that that happened, but it's in there in Matthew's gospel, so we'll take it for what it is and see what he means to say. But Herod certainly, by any other interpretation, had a horrible reputation for killing his own family.
You might say when Christ started at 30 years old, and he accomplished a lot in those 3 years.
Sure did.
I mean, I'm amazed, and like you look at the Bible, and all these things he did maybe every day, or just that people realized that this was going to the Messiah.
Yes, exactly. Well, you know, once he started becoming popular, shall we say, and known by many, many people, he would be a threat. He knew that, I'm sure, to the religious establishment as well as to the political establishment. And so he knew that he had to do a lot in a short time, I would say.
That's accomplished a lot in 3 years. Of course, when he went to baptize, when he was very young, Mary kept a secret of what he said there. You remember when she said, Jesus said, "This is for my Father."
Oh, when they found him in the temple at 12 years old.
Yes.
Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business? But, you know, I would have thought, remember, Mary is a human being, too. I mean, she is not privy to all the information we think she might have been. As a matter of fact, she and Joseph had to raise Jesus as a healthy child and then healthy teenager, healthy adult. So, you know, those couple of remarks he makes to her and Joseph, somebody said to me after Mass one Sunday, I can imagine that Mary took only so much of that. And then she went up to him and said, "You come with me." And took him home, and she grounded him for the next 20 years.
No.
That was quite a punishment. Because you don't hear a thing about him.
No, it's true.
For the next 20 years. You stay home here.
Father, do you wear your white collar when you go out?
No,
Or do you like, because
well, rarely. I wear it. Today I had a funeral. So for funerals and when I have to go see the bishop. And other than that, if I'm making a sick call in the hospital, a lot of times I'll wear it. But other than that, no.
otherwise you can just wear your plain clothes. They
Yep.
would never recognize you as a priest. Have you ever had people recognize you and say, "Aren't you a priest?"
Oh yeah, I don't. The remarks I often get is, "I don't recognize you without your clothes on, Father." And I said, "Oh, thanks a lot. Thank you. Do I see you at the gym or where?" But I enjoy being in casuals, being with, you know.
Have you ever thought about having a deacon?
Yes, I would like one here, except since I have come out of retirement, my stay here is on a year-to-year basis.
Oh.
So I'm sure they would not. I have applied for a deacon, but I'm thinking they aren't giving me one because a deacon is sent to a place for 3 years minimum usually. So, and I've worked with a deacon all my priesthood.
I know there's a lot of deacons over St. Perpetual
Yeah,
right now.
I've always had deacons. They're great help
Yeah.
in the ministry.
Now you're the only one. You're the one. You do both masses, I take, and plus your.
The three of them on the weekend, I do, yes, and all during the week too.
Don't you think about having an assistant to help you?
Well, you know, the people here are very good. I told them at the beginning I'd be going to Florida several times a year because I have a home down there, and I have a buddy down there, a priest with whom I retired. And I said to the people, you know, we did not retire together to live apart, so I'm going to be going down there quite often. They all went. They were just glad to have a priest here. So I get away often enough that I can do everything here. And
Well, I hope you're here for a long time.
Thanks, Ray. And I have a fabulous staff, by the way,
Yeah.
that just take over when I'm away. Okay, now I got to ask you, how long have you been in this parish, St. Benedict's?
We've been in here since November.
Oh, just.
Yes, we started in November. In fact, we went to the lakes for a while.
Okay. Don't
And-
tell any bad stories about
No,
any other
no.
church.
But I went
It's
over.
a
Then we
only-
went over to St. Perpetual.
Okay. Now, how did you end up here?
Well, my wife wanted. We talked about different churches to go to,
Yeah.
and she said she just got tired of what they were doing
Yeah,
at
sure.
St. Perpetual.
Sure.
Of course, we lost a good priest in Father Riccozzi.
Oh, he helps us out here occasionally.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we were there. My wife was on the parish council.
Okay.
I was on there for 3 years, and my wife was on
Boy,
three.
You guys
she was
are
on
really
three.
involved.
Yeah, she was on 3 terms at the parish council,
Oh.
and she was the only person to have that many terms.
Oh, wow.
But the next time she tried to run, Father picked out his own people he wanted.
Sure, sure.
I
Well,
mean, I have no qualms against. I liked Lake because I knew a lot of people there.
sure.
I mean, but I said we were talking about let's go to St. Perpetua, or let's go to St. Benedict. Let's try them.
Sure.
In fact, my wife was a Lutheran,
Oh.
and see, Father Delaney would not serve mass under the priest
Father
that I had
Fred
there for my.
Delaney.
So I got my wife's church, and about 6 months later, Father almost threatened to kick me out of the church. You know,
You're that kind.
and at the time, you know, and somehow I told Father, I said, well, she's taking the instructions. So after that, she gave me communion.
Oh, good.
But
The Fred Delaney, do you know Father Fred was my boss when I taught high school there at
Yes.
Lady of the Lakes. He was there in the late 50s.
yeah, I was
Early
an usher there for a while.
You were, oh my gosh.
I did minister the word for a while
In the old church or the new church?
at the St. Lady Lakes.
New church
And-
or old church?
and I
Because I
also-
was in the old church there.
Yeah. And I also did some deal at St. Perpetua too. And Father had to come down. It happened on 9/11. Remember that thing in 9/11? What happened?
I do.
And somehow I mispronounced the word, and I said "kill" on there by mistake. And I looked at it; it looked like the same spelling, but I said that by mistake. And Father says, "I'm afraid I can't let you do the ministry of the word anymore
Ooh.
because
wow.
of this one word you said."
Oh no.
I said, "I didn't know I said it."
Yeah.
But I like minister of the word. I like going up there and talking in front of people. And like I say, if you can hear me in the back row, you can hear me in the front row.
Sure.
But there's an old saying: if you can hear me in the back row, I hope you do. Because I like
Yeah.
minister of the word, because I think it's a real interesting doing reading the readings and show people these different things that go on.
But that's a very important ministry. As a matter of fact, some people take it for granted. You know, I think our readers here are very good, and they prepare. A lot of people don't. You know, I say that to the congregation. I always have all my priesthood. They should do their preparation before they come to church. I mean, I do a lot. It's my job. You know, of course I would.
Yeah, my wife was in the choir a lot.
Oh,
She liked to sing a lot.
well, she's a musician.
In fact,
of course.
one time a person come up and said, "How come, Father?" I said, "How come you're not using the book?" And she didn't. She just sang without the book. And a lot of people were jealous because you sang without the book. How can you do this? Are there going to be any more changes in the Catholic Church now?
Oh.
Or you said you knew a lot of them, but
They told us in the seminary, because I was ordained just as these changes were starting.
oh, yeah.
And they said these changes in worship would take maybe up to 100 years to be all worked into the worship. But then the biggest changes would come after that. And those would be in the areas of social justice, of peace, and so on. This Pope, Francis, is introducing those.
I know when
issues.
when I received communion, we always had to kneel down in front of the altar.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I did too, at a communion rail.
Yeah.
Oh,
But now they can go up and get the host.
yes, which is much better. I got to tell you one story to close. This may not work anyway, but it was in my first church. I was just newly ordained. It was the Christmas Eve Mass, heavy snowfall. It was out at St. William's in Walled Lake, and only priests could give communion at that time. And so the pastor and I were distributing communion to these, must have been 1,000 people. And so you're doing it very quickly. And a lady comes up, and she comes up with this virginal pose, but she had one of these fox furs on, you know, with the feet dangling on either end, and she had her arms crossed across her décolletage, which was very evident. And I go to put the host on her tongue, and she whipped her tongue back, and the host fell in an unseemly place. And I said, what am I going to do? And she's standing there with her eyes closed, looking holy. And then I don't know what to do next. She opens her eyes. She went. I went. And out she goes. That was the most ridiculous situation, because she came up after Mass, out in the snow, to me, and said, "Father, what do I do with the host?" I said, "My dear, please kneel down and consume it in church." Anyway, it's been an exciting life, my priesthood, and if I had it to do all over again, I certainly would. Even though we've seen some very, very rough times, especially in recent years with the priesthood, I sure would do it all over. I'd correct some things, that's for sure, by God's grace, but here we are.
As sure as I want to thank Father Jim Mayworm. I also thank you, the listening audience, watching my show, and plus also Diane's keyboards. And we also want you to see other shows that are on our cable station. But like I say, you never know who you're going to meet. Remember, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Good night, and this is Ray McAllister saying good night and God bless, and thank you, Father.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much.